But I think as developers, it's really nice to be able to explore the various paths you can take and see where it takes you. Because like I spent the last 2 years going down a developer advocacy track. I've got so many opportunities from it, from networking to speaking to meeting people. It's just like wonderful. And then it's been a really good 2 years, and I'm starting to be at a point where I'm ready to go back. Like Cable is saying, that happens a lot, where I spent 2 years doing this and I'm like, this has been great, but I really miss writing code full time.
Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode of JS Party is brought to you by Rollbar. Deploy with confidence more often, spend less time worrying, and more time on improving your code. You can feel safe knowing every error is reported in real time with Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com.
Welcome, everyone. You're listening to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. We've been dreaming up our next game show episode. This time we're playing Front End Feud, so we need your help. The game relies on public opinion, so we have a survey for you to take. It's fun, not lame, I promise, and we're giving away a free JS Party t-shirt to one lucky participant, so check it out, help us out at jsparty.fm/ff. Once again, jsparty.fm/ff. Okay, let's get into it. Hey, it's party time, y'all.
Hello, welcome JS Party people. We are here for another exciting week of a party with JavaScript. So first let me introduce the panel. I'm Nick, I'll be hosting today. And with me is Amel. Amel, how's it going?
So happy to be here, Nick. Anytime I get to be an old lady about tech is a good day. So you're gonna get to be an old lady today and say, you know what, when I was young.
And with us as well is Divya. Divya, how's it going?
Hello. It's going great.
Awesome. And K-Ball, welcome back.
I'm excited. I'm happy to be here. Happy it worked. And the old lady speaks to me. I just was having a conversation with a coworker, and he said to me, "You realize we're the old fogies now, right?"
Yeah. No, I was just like, when I went like looking at your your little box on my screen made me realize I have an old man partner in the room, and I think that's K-Ball. K-Ball is like, he's like real old man. I'm like a fake old lady, you know. I'm like old in spirit, but maybe not in actuality.
I'm old. I'm about to be 39.
You're definitely older than me, but at the same time, it doesn't not even age. Like I think you've been doing this longer than I have for sure. I probably twice as long because I've been in this for like almost a decade, and my guess is you have like been longer.
I'm at about 16 years, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, you know, and that's exponential because tech is like, you know, like compound interest rates. Like, you know, the longer you've been here, like your first year is not equivalent to the second year, is not equivalent to the third year, right? It's all exponential. So you in dog years, you're like super old.
So as you can guess, today we are going to be talking about careers and career progression. And so we do have a wide range of experience on this podcast, I think. I've been in for about 11 years. And I graduated 11 years ago and got my first job then. And we're all kind of at maybe different areas. And we've definitely gone through a lot of progression on a career in tech. And so let's just kind of jump into it and get started. Does anyone want to share like how they got started into the field?
I can go because I have a little bit of a non-traditional. I didn't major in computer science. I did a little bit of coding as a part of both in high school out of interest and in college as a part of a physics degree. But I certainly was not a software developer. And when I graduated college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew it sure wasn't what my degree was in. And I moved to the Bay Area for a girl and started looking around for work. And bumbled through a few things, including substitute teaching and doing test prep stuff for folks and mentoring and that type of thing before I landed at a small tech startup working essentially doing QA. It was performance-oriented QA, but it was essentially QA. And it was very manual to begin with and didn't have that much technical knowledge required to start, but it gave me a place to start learning. And so my path to software engineer was within that role, I started learning how to script in order to write test harnesses and automate the tests that we were doing and extend the tests. And then I started digging into how do our products actually work and what's the software behind that and talking with people. And by the time I left that, I had made contributions to the core product. I was running all of these advanced automated tests. I'd learned how to code in, I think, 3 different languages and sort of kind of got through that. And then the next job that I ended up getting was actually officially as a software engineer and went there. But that took on the order of 3 years to kind of go through that progression. And I've talked to a lot of people who are kind of non-traditional backgrounds getting in. And I think that story is useful because you really don't need to jump straight to a software engineering position. Even if you've gone through a boot camp, if you're having trouble finding a pure software position, just get your feet on the ground somewhere in the industry. You get a QA position, you get something else. I have a friend who's a coder now who started off doing customer assistance at a tech company, and he was focused on that. And he moved into operations, and so he had to learn SQL and be able to deal with their data. And then he started self-teaching coding, and he went. Once you get in the door at tech companies, the opportunities are there if you're motivated.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin. For me, the best developers I've worked with have come in through different roles, specifically support and QA. Like especially support, people who came in from the support world, they make the best software engineers because they have extreme user empathy, And that's something I pride myself on. Like every product owner I work with is like, oh my God, Amel, like you're such a advocate for the user. I'm like, yeah. We should be jumping hoops to make the user's life easier, not the other way around, And so and support engineers or support technicians or whatever, even folks who've worked in customer service, they get that empathy factor. And so it's just such a great segue into tech. And for me, the whole notion of software engineer is the only job in tech is complete BS because for every software engineer, there's n number of peripheral roles that need to support that person's work and output, both on the input side and the output side, meaning that there's things that are upstream from that person's work, like product people and user experience researchers and designers and this and that. And then there's all this downstream work, right, with QA and support and product, the release engineering. And, there's just so many things to do in this industry. And I think Kevin's advice or K-Ball's advice, people are like, who's Kevin? Who's K-Ball, as you may all know him, not Kevin. K-Ball's advice is just so spot on. Just get your foot in the door. If you're having trouble landing that first, quote unquote, engineering job, here's a dirty little secret I'll tell you. Engineering is problem solving, and product managers and anybody who solves a problem is engineering, right? It's just engineering through code is a specific way to solve a problem. But the reality is you're always solving problems. And if you're interested in solving problems in the tech industry or in a tech role, it's not just limited to software engineers.
Yeah. And with that coming in as just a straight software engineer, you might be solving a problem that no one has. It's definitely about getting that empathy and understanding the problem and then coming in and not developer experience is great, but the users really don't care about that.
Yeah,
that's true.
Which is exactly, if you are in I would call it an elite class, right? Because I consider people who make tools for developers, I consider them to be in a very elite class because I think developers are the hardest they're the hardest customers in the world. And what happens, especially for me, I'll give you a recent example, NPM wasn't the first time developers were my customer, but NPM was the most recent example. I'm upstream from people that are upstream from other people. You know what I mean? So when we break something, we break all the builds, right? And when all the builds are broken, all the customers are angry, right? So there's layers of how high you are. And for me, bugs in Visual Studio Code, for example, are very different than bugs in Zoom, right?
Yeah, as someone who works in developer tooling space, it is true that developers are a hard customer. It's sort of it's very high highs and very low lows, if you think about it. Because if you do have a win, people love it, and developers are very much this is awesome. They might not give you their money because developers tend to not give you money, but they will give you high praise over.
They want stuff for free.
Yeah, it's true. That's the annoying part. But at the same time, it's like when things are good, they're likely to like tweet about it or say it's great. Not always, but sometimes. And then when things are bad, you'll get a deluge of just like posts online.
Oh yeah, no, it's the worst.
And it sucks.
Oh yeah, no, just look at NPM support on Twitter to like get an example of that. But also, really, like, just to take a tangent, because tangents are awesome, and this is JS Party after all. What would this be without tangents? But like, the whole developers like don't like paying for things is kind of broken to some degree, right? Like, yeah, sure, free and open source software for the win, but at the same time, like, software that has services behind it, like that costs money to make and operate. And like, I think the VC startup freemium model has kind of creeped into our culture in a way that's very unhealthy, right? Like, I have no problem paying for good software. In fact, I'm like anytime I buy a license for something, including Sublime, by the way, how many of you keep hitting, like, have, hit that like whatever button on Sublime? Like, just buy that one time.
This is a free version.
Yeah, buy that one time $70 lifetime license. Like, trust me, like, like, get your boss to pay for it, whatever. Yeah. Like, we just have this culture of not wanting to pay for stuff, and I think it can be sometimes problematic because it's just not sustainable,
Mm-hmm. Plus, you're always fighting the instinct of not invented here. I could do that myself, and it'll be better, of course, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely not, but you have to fight against that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You raised kind of an interesting direction when we talk about open source, especially in the context of thinking about career progression, right? Because open source is, on the one hand, an extremely valuable way to sort of boot yourself up those initial steps in the ladder if you're having trouble getting an entrance, right? If you're having trouble finding your first position, or you're stuck somewhere and you're trying to figure out, how do I build my skills and move myself up? Open source has tremendous opportunities there. It also has potentially tremendous opportunities to get visibility in terms of getting yourself in front of people, maybe getting the chance to speak at conferences, things like that. On the other hand, in terms of remuneration, it's very poor. And it's not always clear that open source development can translate directly into those very lucrative jobs. There's a number of stories going around of folks who are trying to find lucrative jobs at the big tech companies, have incredible open source track records, and the companies say, nah, we're not interested.
Yeah, I mean, the motivations for contributing to open source really need to be checked, right? Like, I think it all kind of comes down to like why are you doing this? And just make sure that regardless of what happens, like, the outcome is not going to sway your initial, like you have to be clear about why you're doing this and what you want to get out of this, right? Essentially is what I'm saying. And when it comes to open source, whether if it's like, hey, I'm writing this thing because I want to build in the open and I don't really care what happens, is very different than like, I want to be Twitter famous, and like, or is very different than like, I'm trying to get a job and build up my GitHub resume. Is very, is very famous than like, is very different than like, I'm trying to do open source software development for a living and I want to, like, all of those motivations are very different, and like, you have to just be very intentional and clear about, I think, that for yourself before you start, because otherwise it's like a heartbreaking disappointment. Like,
that intentionality is a really interesting one when we start talking about career advancement.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back on track. I'm taking us everywhere today, and K-Ball is like reeling it in. So I'm gonna just.
We'll try.
I'm gonna stick to the agenda.
I'll harness your energy. You're the engine, and I'll be the steering wheel.
Sounds good.
So
and Nick will be the chassis. Divya will be the like sparkles or something on the car. I don't know. Divya, you're so fun. I'm so happy to be back on a podcast with you.
I'm the pump squad.
Yeah,
I'm here to.
She's the fun factor. Divya's the fun factor, is what I'm trying to say.
I think Divya can give us a really interesting insight into some of the ways in which progression is not maybe the right term, because like, I think a lot of times we view progression as a ladder, right? Like, I go to this, then I go to that, then I go to that. Each step is higher than the next. But I think, honestly, for me, it's more valuable to think about it as a journey where you have choices of directions you can go. And why I bring up Divya is your experience both as a developer and then as a developer advocate, which are two sort of parallel tracks where there are people who go back and forth between them, like yourself. I'm curious how you think about career trajectory and how you've approached it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, and something I think about a lot, because I think so I was on the developer track for a number of years, and then 2 years ago moved towards more of a developer advocate sort of track. And to me, they, like K-Ball was mentioning, it is parallel. Like, I know people like to conflate the two, but they are sort of different because they lead to different things. And at the beginning, of course, I didn't see that as much, because at the beginning I was like, oh, they're kind of the same. But then the more you're in it, the more you're like, okay, when you're going down the developer advocacy track, your interests and focus are slightly different. They're not as product focused as you are, like if you're a traditional software engineer or so on. And it's interesting because I saw that as like my move to developer advocacy as a way to grow a certain skill set that I didn't have the time to grow when I was a software engineer purely. And for me, it was I did it as an experiment. Like, I know this sounds callous, but it was an experiment. And I think it's actually really good to do that. Like, it can be boring to just follow a track. Like, I'm going to go from A to B to C to D. And some people like that because it's just clear. Like in the military, for example, people who stay in the military track, they really like that because it's really clear as to what you will progress to. You know where you're going to be in 20 years. It's sort of this iron rice bowl type mentality, which some people like. But I think as developers, it's really nice to be able to explore the various paths you can take and see where it takes you. Because like, I spent the last 2 years going down a developer advocacy track. I've got so many opportunities from it, from networking to speaking to meeting people. It's just like wonderful. And then it's been a really good 2 years, and I'm starting to be at a point where I'm like, I'm ready to go back. Like Cable was saying, that happens a lot, where I spent 2 years doing this and I'm like, this has been great, but I really miss writing code full time. And so like, that's a move I'm making back. And it's interesting because in the beginning, when I was thinking about it, I actually I had this fear that I had moved and completely deviated and it was impossible to go back. And like, this is a legitimate fear I had, because I was like, I haven't worked on a product team for like the last 2 years. Well, I did rotations, so like kind of, but not fully. So it was only like a short-term thing. It was not like, you get it. And so the fear was like, can I go back? Like, am I going back to square one? Like, do I have to go back to being like a junior engineer and then like work my way up, or intermediate level maybe at best, and then like kind of prove my worth again? And like, after talking to a bunch of people, and within Netlify, everyone is really supportive, I realized that that's actually not true, that you're not regressing by choosing a different path. You just have a different skill set that can be useful. So for instance, the things I learned as being a developer advocate, which is like presenting and like confidently talking about things that are very technical in a way that is understandable to people, which Amal, you do really well, because you give like tech talks that are really in depth and are super understandable. And I think that's a skill that is super useful for engineers, because when you come back to the team, it means that you're able to speak intelligently to requirements within the team. You're also able to speak to stakeholders really well, which I think, like, I honestly didn't think about that until, like, I'm currently on a product team, and like, that's something I'm doing, which I wouldn't have done 2 years ago because I just wouldn't have known to do that. But now I'm like, I have the skills to be able to like present key points as to like the project trajectory. What are we working on? What are we moving towards? And like speak both at a very in-depth technical level and then speak at a higher level as well, and sort of cover that. I think that's really cool because now you're like more on a path to like, it's a seniority, right? Like, it's not like you regressed. You brought the skills with you and then you're continuing on. Like you were mentioning with like being a support engineer, you're an advocate for support for users. And so I think that's a really interesting way to think about it.
It's a circle.
Even within engineering, those communication skills become more and more and more important the further up the progression you rise. I want to actually dig into another point you mentioned there, though, which is this fear of transitioning between paths.
Yeah.
And I'm going to shoot over with a question to Amel. I think another area where people have this fear is around taking on management roles.
Oh boy.
And saying,
yeah, I knew this was coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about this. I want to do this. It seems like a natural progression. But if I do this, will I ever be able to go back to being an engineer? And I know you've recently gone through exactly that, go over, be a manager. Now you're back to more of a pure engineering role.
I see, yeah.
Can you kind of talk through what both the differences and also what the transitions are like going from one to the other and back again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back to some things that Divya said. I think there's like a wealth of information that would be phenomenal to come back to. So I'm going to put a pin in that. To answer your question, this kind of pendulum experience that I've gone through recently, going from an engineering manager to like a principal engineer, and then Divya also kind of going from like developer advocate to developer, luckily within the same company. So she's able to kind of keep that domain expertise and like actually use it to her advantage, which is kind of what she's, alluded to. But, for me, it's just been like, whoa, absolutely. Like it sucked like going from a super senior engineer, like tech lead, to a junior engineering manager, right? So there was this huge transition that I made being a manager. We're like, okay, great. Like I have all of these other skills, right? So remember earlier I said it's a wheel, it's a circle. Like I kind of think of all of the skill sets that you need to be good in this industry, for example, as being something that can be represented on a circular pizza wheel, right? And like if we think of like coding as like one or two slices, right? And architecture is another one, and like leading teams is one, right? Like I was really good at a lot of that, right? But then when it comes to some of these other things around management, I don't even know if it's even in the same pizza pie, quite frankly. I almost think that's like a different pizza pie, right? Where there's some overlap, but really like it's more of a Venn diagram, right? And to kind of go back to tie into Divya, because I just want to keep coming back to what Divya was talking about. It's so deep. Like to kind of tie this back to what Divya was saying, like, I think like developer advocate is also its own pizza pie, but with a Venn diagram overlap, right? And so for me, I've always kind of thought about careers as this like the more you have exposure to different company sizes, different team sizes, different industries, it's like this onion of experience that you're building up, and each of those unique experiences gives you a lot of like just nuggets to walk away with, right? Like working in a startup that's successful and high growth, like you learn so much about like how to scale teams and how to scale processes, how to deal with change management, working at a startup that's failing, you learn like all the things not to do, right? Like working at an enterprise company that's slow or stable, or like there's so many different things that you take from all these different experiences. And I think like that is like ultimately like that's the collectiveness of your career, right? Like it's like all the experiences that you've had, all the like the good, bad, and whatever, like put together, right? And that's why I think people who've had different types of experiences, whether it's different job roles, different industries, especially folks who are coming into tech from a previous life, like they have so much that they're bringing to the table, and I often see that as like undervalued, quite frankly. But to kind of get back to the question, like, yeah, this pendulum move was scary for me the first time, like in the sense that like being a new manager was scary. I was really like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to suck at this. I'm not good at this anymore. And it was a lot of like, it was a huge mental shift because it wasn't my job to be the best engineer in the room anymore. You know what I mean? It wasn't my job to be the best. It was my job to facilitate my team to be the best engineers that they could be. And like, that is something that takes a while getting used to, right? It's not something that you're going to instantly, like, it's my instinct to just hop on a problem and solve it and come up with a solution and just be like, done, right? Like, but it's not my instinct to like hold back my solution so that I can hear other people's first. Does that make sense? Like, I know I can do this better than you, faster than you, whatever. But it's not my job to do it anymore. It's my job to teach you how I would do it, or it's my job to like help facilitate like that experience so that you can get to a point that like, right, where like you are better than me or whatever, right? Like it's a very different shift. So I think that was interesting. And then like the decision for me going back into a principal engineer role was one that was definitely driven by lots of reasons, including burnout from being a manager, going through a very crazy acquisition, it was like the most difficult place to be a new manager at especially at the time that I joined NPM during the most crazy period of its life. And so I was pretty burnt out from that. And I was like, hell no, I am not going to be a manager again. And if I am, I have to do it somewhere where I believe I'm going to be set up for success and I can institute change and I have stability. And for me, that had to be at a company where I already like knew my way around as an engineer and I could like move into that role, not having to learn everything again. So similar to what Divya is doing. Okay, Divya is like, all right, I really know Netlify, I know the product. Now going into an engineering role, I don't have to learn everything, right? Like I can just focus on the code pieces. And so like similar to that, like if I am ever a manager again, it is hopefully going to be at a company that is not new to me, where I am not learning everything all at once. But yeah, but like being an IC again is like just super natural to me. So this hasn't been challenging, but what I can say is that spending some time as a manager has made me a better IC, like by far. Like I know how to escalate, I know when to escalate, I know like what's expected of me, I know how to communicate, like I wrangle, so my manager, like I'm less headache for him and also at the same time more headache, right? Because like I'm like a manager. So that's a long answer.
I think the big takeaway from this section so far is that there's a lot that you can bring to the table with outside experience, whether that be from a different career, a different experience being a user before working on a product, or being a manager of the engineers that work on a product and then going back to it.
This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean, Droplets, Managed Kubernetes, Managed Databases, Spaces, Object Storage, Volume Block Storage, Advanced Networking like virtual private clouds and cloud firewalls, developer tooling like the robust API and CLI to make sure you can interact with your infrastructure the way you want to. DigitalOcean is designed for developers and built for businesses. Join over 150,000 businesses that develop, manage, and scale their applications with DigitalOcean. Head to do.co/changelog to get started with a $100 credit. Again, do.co/changelog.
We've been chatting careers here on JS Party, and there was something that Divya said that Emil wanted to follow up on. Emil, what was that?
Why, thank you, Nick. So, what I wanted to follow up on was quite literally everything she said. But in the interest of time, I'm going to try to limit that scope to two things, two big things. So the first one is the smaller one, is, she kind of like alluded to the fact that like, she is, maybe either was stagnated or bored or wanted a new challenge, really loves her company and the team that she works with, but at the same time, like wanted to do something else. And I just wanted to encourage everyone to feel free to not only do the same, but also remember that you are the best advocate for your needs and your career growth, right? And so, and there's like, and you should continually, I mean, at least this sounds, this is definitely a personal value. So I don't want to preach a personal value, but like strive for continuous improvement, right? And growth in the sense that if you're coasting a little too long as a software engineer that's earlier in their career, right? If you feel like, all right, cool, I got this, like time for a new challenge, right? Whether that's leading a new initiative or project for your team, or whether that's taking on more responsibilities, whether that's switching teams, like just keep growing, like don't stagnate. This is an industry that really is very unforgiving to stagnation. And, just make sure that you're like advocating for your growth and that you are looking and like being proactive about seeking opportunities for growth, right? And just, your manager isn't necessarily going to automatically do that, right? And so just remember that you are the continuous factor in your own life, right? Like you're the person that has been with you at every job, right? So you know what your story is, you know what your path should be, right? So just kind of make sure to be your own advocate. So that's one thing.
That's not as comforting as I think you mean it to be.
Really? Yeah. It probably sounds scary and like a little bit psychopathy.
Well, I think there's a piece of that I think is really worth digging into, which is I think a lot of folks feel uncertain about where they want to go.
Totally.
And what they want to do.
That's a good segue to my second point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, when we talk about you being the owner of your career progression, that's why that can feel really scary.
Right.
Because it's not clear what that means, or even like, where should I be going? And so I think, after you dig into Divya for one more point, it would be well worth our kind of fleshing out things that we have found, both in terms of like helping understand the options available, and also like tactics and tools we've found useful for navigating that. Because like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? Like
Me neither.
I'm doing it, but there's a lot of things I've discovered along the way about aspects I like, goals that I have, pieces that have helped me guide that, even without a crystal clear vision of where I'm going.
Yeah. No, Kevin, I think that is like segment number 3. That is like what we should dig into for segment number 3, because the next topic I'm going to talk about is something I think we could definitely focus on for the rest of the segment, which is ultimately the fact that our industry, in many, many ways, right? This isn't necessarily, I want to call this a failure. It isn't necessarily a failure, right? Because the industry is so young as a whole, like tech, and a lot of what we do is like my job didn't exist, 40 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago. Like my exact job didn't exist like 5 years ago, for example, not even, right? Like, let alone like the roles and responsibilities and how like our processes have changed, right? So the industry being so young has led to this, like, basically, I would say we don't have a uniform career ladder, right? And so and then the Silicon Valley like culture that isn't necessarily the healthiest, right, has like taken the lead on defining career ladders. And so okay, cool, we have things now beyond senior software engineer, but for a lot of companies, small and big, believe it or not, like senior software engineer is kind of like where things cap out, right? Like staff engineers, senior staff, principal, architect, like, those are not necessarily things that exist. And so ultimately for me, it's about like really making sure anywhere I go, right? At this point, I'm senior enough in my career, or like anywhere I go, like they need to have a well-defined career ladder, and one that is parallel in the sense that, like, if people are interested in doing technical management, they have a parallel track that starts like at the principal level and above, where like an engineering manager is kind of like my sibling, right? But like I am in charge as a principal engineer, I am in charge of a group of teams backlogs, right? Like teams backlogs, like it's not just my backlog. It's like, okay, like here's a group of teams that like we're like shepherding and guiding, etc. And I have org-wide influence even just beyond the scope of the teams that I'm managing. But like a manager, like can go up a different track, and as a principal engineer, I can keep going up another track, whether that's senior principal, architect, etc. Right? So there just has to be growth beyond senior software engineer, and that's just not uniform in our industry. And it's a major pain point, like that is a real thing, because you see these huge bands where like you have one person that's been in the industry for like 15 years that has the same title as somebody who's been in the industry for 5.5. And that's just a little awkward for me, because like that title doesn't actually accurately represent the skills that other person has, the one that's more senior, So with that, I rest my case. I'd love to hear from you, Nick, and K-Ball and Divya. Like,
do you think that lack of a consistency for the more technical side drives more people to think about the engineering side of it or the people side of it more? And if not, where does one go once they feel like they've gotten senior enough?
I would say yes. I'd love to hear from K-Ball. K-Ball's been around like the game a lot longer than I have. What do you think?
So it depends. It depends a lot. I have possibly a slightly skewed version on this because I've almost entirely worked at companies or worked as a consultant where in both cases, it was very early stage companies where they did not have super well-defined career ladders, or as a consultant where you're kind of owning yourself. I think a bigger question is is the company organized in such a way and having ambition in such a way that there's actually the scope for you to keep going up that. The company I'm working at now had a very senior person decide to leave. And the reason was, this is a very ambitious, extremely talented, top of the field engineer. And the type of engineering scope that he was trying to achieve was no longer available because we're in a stage where we've got a lot of the fundamental, like he's a 0 to 1 guy, right? Yeah. Like he wants to own a thing that's going to go from 0 to massive. And having done that here, he's looking for his next version of that, which that's totally legit. And as you kind of look up, like that's the type of scope and scale, like he's able to do that because he succeeded, right? And we've got the thing and it's working and we're rolling. So as you're looking, and there are similar questions around team, right? Like if you want to level up so that you're leading a team, are there teams for you to lead, right? Or is that already filled? Like
exactly.
Like when you think about the structure of a company, you need to look for, is it creating space for you to grow in the ways that you want to grow? And that's one of the reasons why I think for career progression, a lot of times big companies can be very helpful because they just have so many things where there is space.
They have the structure in place, yeah.
And the other thing is startups that are growing faster than they have the skills for now. And that could be because they're growing very fast, or it could be because they're very early, or what have you. But basically places where there is more to be done and more scope to be had than there are people to do it. And so you can kind of grow in whatever direction you want. And so, coming back to this question about like, is there a clear trajectory? It can definitely help if there's clarity. But I think much more than having that clear like job title progression, it's what are the types of responsibilities and scope and ownership that are available, and how do those match to the areas in which you want to grow?
Yeah, Divya, I see you foaming at the mouth. I want to hear from you. I have so much to say on this.
It's a really good point, because I think one of the things that sometimes people think that they have to move companies because they're like, usually it's like, I'm unsatisfied here, I'm burnt out, or like, I want to do something different. But I think it's a really interesting way of looking at it, which is the way you mentioned it, K-Ball, which I feel is a very healthy and reason, like, not to say that other reasons are unreasonable, but this is a different way of looking at it, where you're the champion of your career trajectory. I think sometimes people stay at companies because they're comfortable, like Amal was saying, and that's fine. But if you know what you want and you know what's next for you, and the place that you're at isn't going to offer you that, then that's actually a good reason to leave, to be like, let me go find something else. And also maybe if you're able to identify the type of things that you enjoy doing. So if you're someone who is like a small startup person who likes to build and own things and take them from 0 to 1, not necessarily scale, but just build very quickly, and the company grows and is no longer at that early stage, then maybe you're like, I like early stage, and you jump to the next early stage thing and you just keep doing that. It's because that's something that you enjoy doing. And I think people often like, I think it's very common to just see yourself going through the titles as a way of progression, but a different way of looking at it is, what do you want to work on, and what will grow your skills, or how do you want to grow your own skills? So for example, I've been working on front end like for a long time, and that's been my focus, but I'm realizing that I've actually never worked extensively in my professional career on back end stuff. And I'm like, that's actually sort of a black hole sometimes, because I'm like, unless it's in JavaScript, I have no idea what that's like. And I'm getting a lot of the experience now. Like, I had to write a bunch of Rust code and figure out how to like manage my Docker containers and run tests in a separate environment. And that's a whole other experience that I'm realizing I've been not privy to because I've focused so much. And it's a sense of like stepping back and being like, okay, what else is there, and how else can I deepen my knowledge? Because it's also sort of an exploration, right? Going back to a previous point, it's exploring like, okay, let me go try this for a while. And then who knows, like you might do it and hate it, but then you have the knowledge now that you hate it, rather than never knowing a thing, because you focus so much on the career trajectory that you're going down, and like the titles, and not wanting to lose that track. So I think it's just a different way of thinking about it. It's it's, yeah.
Yeah. I want to plus a million on everything you said. And like, I don't know, like it just, again, it brings back the your own advocate point, right? Like, and also
Yeah.
for me, like the whole continual growth means like, quite frankly, I'm always a little uncomfortable, right? Like I'm always learning something new, something that makes me uncomfortable, something that shifts my landscape. My cheese is always moving, to kind of use that analogy of like who moved my cheese, right? And I think for me, the whole rounding out your skills, like front end, back end, data, whatever, like, like that is like a really good way to also grow at the same company, right? So like if you've been writing front end code for 2 years, time to get uncomfortable. Like go write some back end code, right? Like you like go learn about how the data and like back end is not the same as data. Like data is its own beast to like learn and learn well. A lot of our performance problems come from badly designed like databases and data schemes. So it deserves its own kind of space in your brain. And you can like go learn about data, go learn about pipelines, go learn about cloud, go learn about like data pipelines. Like there's so many ways you can round out your skills and actually stay within the same company as well. And so Divya, I'm
Yeah.
so happy to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, because it's just a matter of like, I mean, I didn't think that. You always assume that you're hired for X role and you stay in X role, and when that role no longer fits you, you leave and you find another role in a different company. And honestly, this is the first job where I've been like, I really like it here. Like, this is great. I like the product. I believe in the mission. Like, is there anything else is there another team that I could find?
And it's high growth.
Yeah, it's about growth. And
no, it's high growth. Like the company's growing, which means there's going to be continually new things for you to do.
For sure. I think it's also like, I mean, to Cable's point, it matters as to the company that you're at. Because some companies, they don't offer you those opportunities. They're like, we have 5 backend people, we have 5 front-end people, we have 2 DevOps people, whatever. And that's the structure that we're always going to be. And if you're a front-end person who's like, I want to do backend, they're like, no, your role is to do front-end, and that's what you're going to do. And in those situations, then yes, like if you want to explore something else and you're not given the opportunity, sure, leave. But if you can find an opportunity, and I'm not advocating for like stay always at the same company and never move, but I'm just saying like, it's just, I think the opportunity for you to try something you're not familiar with within a company is higher because people know you. So you don't interview for those roles. Like if you interview for a backend role and you're not a backend engineer, like, I don't know, like there's a chance you're never going to get through that process.
Yeah. It's such a good point. So take advantage of the fact that you have domain expertise. You've built up credibility.
Yeah.
You're allowed to flail a little bit. Like the business has shown that you are valuable or whatever, right? Like you've proven your worth, so to say. Like even though that's another problematic thing, but like that's just the reality. Like unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So to just kind of quickly round out this point, I wanted to just add to something that K-Ball said earlier to Nick's question, which is like, what I see happen with people going into management is that like a lot of times there isn't another way for them to get to get a promotion, right? So like what they do is they take the best quote unquote coder and then they'll just throw her at like into management. They'll be like, hey, you best coder, you're now a manager, lead this team or whatever. And like maybe she didn't want to do that, right? Like, but that's the only way that like they're able to get that career progression. And what happens is you have a bunch of really bad managers in engineering, especially. Like there are more bad managers than good ones in tech. And that's a lot of times because people either aren't trained or this wasn't their passion, etc. So for people who really like communication, process, mentoring, please, 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 please consider becoming a manager because we need you. We need people who want to do this and want to do it well because like trust me, like even when I was a manager, like okay, I'm a good engineer, don't get me wrong, but like I always felt like my skills like leading the team and like working with stakeholders and mentoring, like I felt like I was always interested in stuff that other people weren't, and so therefore I always felt like I could be replaced on the engineering side but not so much everything else. Does that make sense? So there's like 20 people who could code better than me, but not like barely anyone that could do all of the other stuff as good as me, right? So just if that's your passion, if that's what you like, I would encourage you to like lean into it, and please like save us from the horrible world of technical managers that like is the reality for most of us today.
Yeah, I think also like you mentioned this earlier, but the general track that people assume is you're an engineer, you become senior, and then you become manager, which I think is not true. And I was reading an article like that was posted a couple days ago by Tanya Riley, and she's actually a phenomenal engineer, and she's someone who has chosen not to go down the manager track. Like, she's been an engineer for a while. She's built up like a very strong skill set, and she's stayed technical. So she's essentially a tech lead. And I'll post the article in the show notes, just like a way in which you can stay technical and go down a technical track to like principal level engineer. And you're leading and architecting projects at that point, but you're not managing people. You're managing the project, right? And the direction of that project, which is very different because honestly, like you being a manager is almost just managing the people. Like, you're sort of managing the projects, so to speak, but you're mostly just making sure that everyone is efficient. And that doesn't require a lot of like technical competence, really.
What's up, JS Party people? Have you ever wondered if you could be offering a faster, less buggy experience for your customers? Well, with Raygun Error and Performance Monitoring, you have all the information you need at your fingertips to quickly find and fix errors and performance issues across your tech stack down to the line of code. Raygun makes it easy to monitor the impact of your performance improvements, quickly identify issues across web and mobile apps, and see how your code performs in the hands of your customers. This saves you time, this saves you money, and this saves your sanity. Head to raygun.com to join thousands of customer-centric software teams who use Raygun every single day. Again, raygun.com to give them a try with a free 14-day trial.
So let's come back to this question of how do we think about managing our own career trajectories? What are some of the options out there? What are some of the directions? I have some thoughts that I found really useful, but that I'd also really love to hear what y'all have found useful. I think one thing that I've personally found useful and that I've also found when I'm mentoring folks is very useful for them is kind of stepping back and explicitly thinking about your goals, and not just your goals in a job, but like, what are you trying to get to? What's important to you? Is wealth important to you? Like, do you come from a background where, you know, getting to financial stability or even getting to financial abundance is extremely important? What about freedom? I have a friend who spent 5 years working as a freelancer, building up a clientele where each of his clients were totally happy to communicate asynchronously and had lots of work that was not super deadline driven. So he then took that and spent 1.5 years traveling around the world as a digital nomad. And he told me, I have deliberately optimized my work and my life so that I can decide at every moment, do I want to be working this hour or not? And he was extremely successful with that. He optimized for this travel and freedom aspect. Other aspects, like, are you going to optimize for influence or ownership? That has different implications. Maybe that implies you want to work at a smaller company rather than a bigger company because you can touch more things. Other areas that you might be interested in, I know multiple people who are professional musicians who support themselves with a day job coding. It's tremendously more lucrative than waiting tables. I know another guy who's a professional actor who does the same thing, right? Like, you can have many different goals about where you want to take your life. And those can have very different implications for the type of career trajectory you want to take and what types of things you want to optimize for. So that's kind of the first place I'd love to start, is thinking about goals. And I'm curious what you all think about, what some of your goals were, and what other tools you use to help map out your career trajectories.
I want to hear from Nick. Can we hear from Nick?
Oh man, I'm the worst one at this because I really don't know.
You just live. You just wake up and you're just like, all right, let's look at my Git history for yesterday. Where did I leave things off?
Well, and that's definitely true in 2020 right now. It's just,
yeah. Is it
how do I get to tomorrow?
Monday or Sunday or like What day is it in 2020? I don't know. Time is flat. Time is a flat thing these days.
I think I'm at a point in my career where I'm trying to decide what I want to do, because I do feel like I have pretty good skills on the more social side, talking about code, simplifying code. And then, I don't know, I feel like I'm an okay developer. And do I want to try and keep going technical? Do I want to go the more managerial route? I worry about things like ageism maybe in tech and how that might affect me later on. Like, will I still be writing React components or whatever the new thing is in 2050 or whatever, right? I don't really know how. I keep thinking too far out, I think, and not close enough. And I'm just, especially right now, living day to day, trying to just have fun and learn new things and challenge myself. But it's all just technical challenges that are very much related to the problem set that I see in my immediate future.
Yeah. How about you, Divya?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's actually really, I have similar sentiments in terms of like a lot of uncertainty as to like where to go, which if you talked to me like 2 months ago, I was there and I kind of still am. Like, I think I was joking, and it might have been on JS Party or maybe some other thing where I was like, I'm going through a career crisis now. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And this is when I was at a developer experience engineer where I was like, I don't know if this is the direction I want to go in. And like, I sort of don't know still. But the thing that I usually try to emulate is I try to look at people in the industry that I look up to and then sort of see where they came from or like what was their path. Like, I'm not trying to copy paths or anything because everyone's path is different, but to get ideas as to like various directions that people took to get to where they are that I think is interesting. I'm like, oh, this person is a principal engineer. That's cool. How did they get there? And then I look at their history because usually via LinkedIn, it's kind of weird. But the one time I use it, or sometimes like they might write a blog post about it and you read it just to like get a sense of that and figure out like what you want for yourself. And it might not give you all the answers. Like, for example, I still am like, do I want to work for a company like Google? Who knows? Like right now, I'm just like, that seems like huge and crazy. And I don't know if I want to be at such a giant organization where I'm a small fly. But yeah, like you don't know those answers, but I think it's useful to do the research or just like keep looking. And also like talking to people, I think is one thing that I was told is useful. Just like, if you don't know what you want to do, like talk to someone who, you know, like a peer or someone who you know in the industry, and they're always willing to say like, hey, this is what I think or whatever. And people have opinions all the time. And sometimes it's annoying to hear people's opinions, but I think sometimes it's also useful because you're like, okay, you can synthesize it and then throw it away if you don't care about it, or like take it into account if you do. Just to get more knowledge, because there's never a right answer. Like, there are times in my career where I do wish that there was a path for me. Like, my brother is in the Air Force, and he's been in the Air Force for 10 years, and there's been just a path that he's taken. And I'm jealous of that. Like, there are times when I'm just like, it must be nice to just not have to think about what's next. I mean, he's at a point where he's thinking about what's next, but like, in general, when you're in that path.
Yeah, but in all fairness, that clarity of career has come with a lot of other trade-offs, though, right? In the sense that, like, when you're in some type of military, the amount of flexibility and free thought and like the direction that you can have with your career,
of course,
right? So that rigidity comes with, or like that clarity of path comes with like extreme rigidity, and like that is a trade-off. Like, you have to decide what kind of a communicator are you, where are you happiest, you know, like all that jazz. But yeah, I hear you on being jealous.
Hearing both of you say you feel extremely uncertain, can I share a sort of approach or tool that I used at times when I've been in that boat?
Teach us, K-Bomb. Give us the wisdom.
I don't remember where I got this from, but 2 layers. So I have a Google Sheet, a spreadsheet that is called K-Ball Work Priorities. And
cool.
I just have a list. It has 3 columns.
Okay.
The first one is considerations. The second one is importance, where I have a simple 1, 2, 3 ranking scale, where 1 means this is important or good, and 2 means medium. It's valuable but not crazy important. And 3 is either it's not important or bad for me. And then I have a third column, which is just for like type or considerations, like if there's a different way of thinking about it. So, and then start by just throwing down like, what are the different aspects of different jobs or things that I might care about? So I have schedule flexibility, a sane work schedule, learning and growth, team, salary, commute, vacation, open source time and opportunities for other extras, writing, speaking, and teaching opportunities, leadership opportunities, networking opportunities, impact. And then just, I mean, I would start with, don't even think about which ones are the most important. Just think about the different characteristics you might care about, throw them down, keep it dynamic so you can always add things, and then say what's most important to you. Like for me, the 4 that I've marked as the most important or good are schedule flexibility, a sane work schedule, learning and growth, and the team. And then everything else that's on that list that I just named, salary, commute, et cetera, is medium important, but it's not like this is the most important thing. One other small nuance I have on there is like for like salary, the way I describe it is there's a threshold and then a slow rise, right? Like there is a threshold that must be met. If you're not going to pay me anything, I'm not going to work for you. And I have a bar. And then like, if you're paying me more above that bar, that's good, but it doesn't make that big of a difference in my choices. And that's the bar that it takes to sustain my life in the way that I want it. Similarly for commute.
That's so nice. That really helps you not be emotional about things, you know? I love it. Like, yeah, like giving these things different weights. And it just, like, it's kind of like you should do that when you're buying a house so that, like, you have your exact criteria and, like, you know what the house needs to have at minimum before you know, otherwise you walk in and you get emotional. You know, they've staged the house really beautifully and you get all emotional and right. It's the same thing like with companies, like it really has to fit the bill, like on, you know, on the things that you really want and doing that objectively, like the way K-Ball's doing, that's like phenomenal. That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it can start super scrappy too. Like I later ended up fleshing out into like sentences describing what I was looking for in those things because you know there was a while I was running my own business, working as a consultant, teaching, doing things. Right. I was very happy with that. People kept offering me jobs and I wanted something where I could just send it to them and say, okay, here are the conditions where I would consider a job with you over what I'm doing now. And they were very high. That's a very high bar. And some of them are flexible. Some of them are not. But like that exercise can help you think about what is really important to you and are you getting what's really important to you where you are? And then you can start taking the steps of, okay, if I'm not, how do I get to where I can get those things? And I think, Divya, your point about talking to people can help expand your awareness of like, what even are those considerations? Like you may not, before I met my friend who traveled around the world, I never even thought about the possibility of could I set things up so that I would never have to get on a phone call with a coworker or a client so that I could be in whatever time zone, wherever, or on a plane or whatever at any time of day. Like that's mind-boggling to me. Yeah. And now I kind of wish I'd known that earlier before I had family and stuff that tie me down in other ways. But,
wow. If I could turn back time, right? If I could find, all right, I'll stop singing now. And by the way, I don't know what I sound like, not my singing voice. I'm in Vermont, dear listeners, and I didn't bring a like travel mic or anything, so I apologize if my sound quality is extra bad. I apologize, but
you sound good.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I don't know what I sound like. So I would say, to answer your question for me, Nick, like for me, it's just I have a longer term goal of like being an entrepreneur. And like I'm very much like entrepreneur. I'm entrepreneur in training in the sense that like I don't necessarily want to be my own CTO, but like at some point I will have to be. And so that's kind of I've just been working towards building the skills to like be a CTO. Like so I have a very specific goal. And you know, I just want to be able to like run and understand all aspects of like how to build software and I've just had a lot of mentors and people who I've been able to lean on for different areas of expertise. And I would say that the closing note on this for me is like talk to different people, similar to what Divya said. Like it's really like annoying to hear other people's perspectives sometimes because they try to like sway you or what it's different than yours.
Yeah.
But that difference in value and like when you disagree with somebody, like you should really try to dig into why, right? Because understanding why you disagree with them actually just highlights something about you, you know? And so just like keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say advice is like recycled nostalgia, I think. And that's not, I can't take credit for coming up with that. That's from the Sunscreen song. It's a wonderful song for people who were growing up in the 90s. We'll link that in the show notes. It's called the Sunscreen song. And if you don't know it, then I'm sorry, but you should totally you should listen to it after this song. It's not an actual song. It's like advice to on a soundtrack. It's awesome.
Is this like an American thing?
This is definitely an American thing, but this was global. I'm an American, but I grew up in Dubai. The first time I heard the Sunscreen song, I was like a child in Dubai. So Divya,
everybody's free to wear sunscreen. Is that the one?
Yes, but trust me on the sunscreen. It's like such a great song. Anyways, we'll link it and like I'll end it there. So, what other words of wisdom are in the Sunscreen song? Divya's listening to it now.
Right.
I'm just like trying not to play it. I just found it and I was like, I'm gonna play it on my phone, but then it's gonna pick up.
For those of us who were in high school in the 90s.
Oh my God,
dating
Kevin,
myself here.
Come on.
This was going around it at like every time you got around to graduation. So.
Yeah. Wait, what was it? The class of 99
like
or something? I don't remember what it was.
It's your vitamin D to our vitamin C graduation song. What?
Basically.
I think vitamin C's graduation was like, yeah, I think that was my elementary school graduation.
Oh my God, Divya. Yeah. How old are you? Like 12? Jesus. Anyways.
I'm not 12.
Yeah, you just look at, right. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I do. I have the Asian genes.
It's okay. I have the African genes. So.
Yeah, I'm told it will be great when I'm 40 or 50. It'll come in handy. Now it just sucks, but it's fine.
All right, we will wrap there. Thank you so much for the great conversation about career progression and wear your sunscreen.
The topic for this episode was requested by Adrian in the JS Party channel in our community Slack. He was listening to the live recording of our conversation with Ahmad Nasri and said that an episode on career progressions would be pretty cool. So here it is. Hope you enjoyed it, Adrian. Good things happen when you hang with us in Slack. Get started today at changelog.com/community. Quick reminder, please take that front-end feud survey. Early feedback says it's actually fun, which is weird, I know, for a survey. That's at jsparty.fm/FF. We appreciate it. This episode was hosted by Nick Nisi with panelists Amel, Divya, and K-Ball. It was produced by me, Jared, and the music is provided by the Beat Freak, Breakmaster Cylinder. We're brought to you by awesome sponsors. Shout out to Fastly, Linode, and Rollbar, and a brand new sponsor, Raygun. Welcome to the show. That's all we have for you this week. We'll talk to you next time.